All right, so you know the two different types of bar models. So let's see how we would use them for word problems. So we're going to start off doing part whole bar models for addition and subtraction. And I always tell my kids to read one sentence at a time till they thoroughly understand it, read through it 2 or 3 times if they need to, and then the bar model will help them as well. So Mrs. Stephanie has 138 Crayola markers. All right. She adds 55 markers to her collection. How many Crayola markers does she have now? Before they start solving, I encourage them to write their answer sentence with a blank or a as I call it. So, how many Crayola markers does she have now? She has Crayola markers now. And then we reread each sentence again and start with our bar models. So Mrs. Stephanie has 138 Crayola markers. I'm going to write 138, label it on a bar. She adds 55 markers to her collection. So it's part of the same set. She's adding more on, so I'm going to add another box. And because it's only 55, technically it should be shorter than the 138. And I'm going to label it 55. And I want to find out how many Crayola markers she has now. So I'm going to find out this number right here. Now again, looking at my bar model, I can clearly see this is the biggest number. So what do you do when you want to find the biggest number? You add the two other numbers. So I'm going to add 138 plus 55. Start in my ones place. 13, you have to regroup. 9, 100, and I would encourage my students, circle it to make sure it stands out as your answer, to check with the inverse operation. So they would take their answer, 193, and this time they would subtract out 55. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to do the math. I'm just going to take it for granted that we got it right, but we should come up with 138, which is what we started with. And we know that that's a reasonable number, and we've checked our answer. So we can put it in our answer sentence, 193. So that's when you have both parts and you're trying to find the whole. Let's look at the second question. The library owns 500 books. There are 274 checked out. How many books are in the library now? Books are in the library now. Again, start off with our answer sentence, and then we reread again and we start making our bar model. The library owns 500 books, so I'm going to make my bar, label it 500. There are 274 checked out. Well, they own all of them, but some of them are checked out, so I'm going to break that into two parts. These are going to be the ones that are checked out, and I'm going to label it 274. And again, they're part of one set. That's why I use part whole. And I want to find out how many books are in the library now. Well, that's all the books that are left. Again, this is the biggest piece, which I have the answer to the biggest piece. So how do I find one of the smaller pieces? I'm going to subtract. So I would do 500 minus 274. They would regroup into the tens place. From the tens place to the ones place, we have 6 ones, 2 tens, and 2 hundreds. Circle my answer. And again, my students would be checking it with the inverse operation. They would add back in the 274, and they would get the 500, hopefully. And so we've checked the reasonability of this. We look at it, it clearly makes sense. So we would put it back in here, 226. So this time, since we had the biggest number, we subtracted for the answer. The third one, let's see, says Mr. Smith's toy store has 103 stuffed animals. He sells some of the stuffed animals, and now he has 74 left. How many stuffed animals were sold? Stuffed animals were sold. Okay, and then we would start reading again, start drawing our bar model. Mr. Smith's toy store has 103 stuffed animals. He sells some of the stuffed animals, so he sells some of them. Okay, And we know that these are the ones that he sold. We don't know how many that he sold though. And now he has 74 left. We know now he has 74 left. How many stuffed animals were sold? We can find out because we know we have the biggest number. So what do we do when we have the biggest number and we're solving for one of the smaller numbers? We subtract. So 103 minus 74. Again, my students would be regrouping. And this would be 9 and 2 tenths. And we would make sure that that was reasonable. We would check it with the inverse operation, and we would come up hopefully with 103, and we could put that answer into our answer sentence. So that's how you would use the part whole. In all of them, they have a set that's broken up into parts, and that's why we use the part whole. Check out my other next video, and that will be using comparison bar models. Thanks. Hope it was helpful.